I think what motivates me is the love of the game of football. I don't really need much to get me going because I love football so much. Just the fact that I get to strap up and put a helmet and shoulder pads on and go out there and line up against somebody and, go against them is what all I need is to motivate me is to go out there and, have fun and hit somebody and fly around with my teammates.
So the question is, who is that? Answer, Alabama linebacker Will Anderson Jr. He was at SEC Media Days talking about what motivates him. I'm motivated by the love of the game also. We have Brandon Justice, Mason Blue Review senior editor, with us here on this Wednesday, July the 20th. Good to see you, Brandon. What motivates you?
Oh, geez, what motivates me? Fulfillment. Myself and others. That's why I coach. Love doing it. I think that kind of applies to Mason Blue Review too. I feel like we fulfill some people as well with the information they want and the stories they want to read. So yeah, I would say fulfillment.
I love it. I don't know why my screen. Do you have the light blue looking screen there too? Not the typical one. What's going on with that? Is that what you see? Good to you.
I had the normal one.
Okay, so it's just my computer. All right. Well, that's all right. Well, good. It is the Mason Blue Review. It's Michigan football and basketball today. Michigan football today. We're live weekdays at 1 o'clock. We're talking about the latest in Michigan sports. We're a part of Rivals.com. Brandon Justice is with us, the Mason Blue Review senior editor. If you're out there and you have a question, hit the comment section and go ahead and leave a question, and we will give you that answer. I already see one in the queue, so we're good to go there. I have some questions as well that I want to get to, so let's not mess around, right? Let's get to those questions, and the first one that comes up is about Michigan football, and let's put it up on the screen. How do you think Michigan is doing with name, image, and likeness? Now, we answer this a lot, but it also seems to change weekly as well. People ask you the question of how Michigan is doing with their name, image, and likeness. What do you say?
I think it's a process that is far different than the ones that are being glorified on a national level. And whether you agree with that or not is your own prerogative. But Michigan has a drawn-out process. They haven't gone away from their process. And, in looking at sports as a whole, you think about franchises, right, who have to at some point have a long-term plan, and they don't duck away from that process. Typically, that works out in their favor. You think about teams who maybe draw out a process but never stick to it. Or you think about teams who if you think about the Red Wings back in like 2016, 15, when they were still kind of denying the fact that they were in a rebuild and they were still trying to compete even though they couldn't. The Tigers even had a blip of that as well. And so I think about it like that. Michigan has a process and they're sticking to it. And I think if they were to give in to the pressure that they've heard from the outside world and change their process, that's when I would think, okay, they didn't know what they were doing and the pressure of the public forced them to kind of change their hand. The fact they haven't changed it tells me they believe in it and they see the long-term payoff. The other side of the coin is the fact that all of these big NIL deals that we've been talking about, Dennis, for the past several months, from Quinn Ewers all the way down to Dante Moore, how many different NIL subjects are there out there in the country right now with players that are disappointed because promises aren't being fulfilled? We just talked about the Pitt wide receiver who transferred from Pitt to USC, who came out and said that he was frustrated, or I think it was just a report, but he said frustrated about USC's not fulfilling the promises. And then we saw several reports last week about multiple guys who are all over the country aren't seeing their NIL promises fulfilled as promised. So again, we continue to see this thing play out, and we're continuing to see places try to make the short-term call, and they're learning it has to be a long-term sustainable thing. And Michigan has had the long-term sustainable approach. Have they pressed gas hard enough? Maybe not. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's been a perfect situation. However, they've stuck to their process. They haven't budged, and I think that's more encouraging than anything else.
Yeah, I think that if Michigan would have been able to land Dante Moore a couple of weeks ago, they wouldn't have had to answer any questions about their approach. And I think that at the end of this month, if they are somehow able to land Jaden Davis, whose picture's in the lower right-hand corner, I don't think they're going to have to answer any questions either. And that might be coming as quickly, at the barbecue. If Michigan could get a commitment from Jaden Davis, they don't have to say anything. I could say, you can just look back and say, wow, this approach has really paid off for them. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. I would predict that it doesn't. I would think that he would take a wait and see approach with Michigan. But there's also, if you are, and right now it is free to subscribe to the Maize and Blue Review until kickoff on September the 3rd, you will see that there is activity going on with a Michigan collective that I don't know when it's going to spring, the fall, when it's going to open up, I should say, not waiting till spring. It might open up in the fall, and, Michigan might be able to, open up a lot of people's eyes at that point. So we're going to have to wait. I keep saying wait and see. People don't want to wait and see, but maybe, Michigan is playing chess while other teams are playing checkers. Here's a question, and we'll get an answer from Brandon Justice. OM's question: thoughts on Michigan scoring more than 40 points against MSU?
Well, first off, I might have to consult you. I am trying to get better with my number and math skills. So, seriously, I was a struggle with math. Now, to get to your question,
they scored what? It was 37 to 33 last year. So, can Michigan get to 40 points against MSU this year?
Yeah, I mean, hey, 40 is lofty in any situation, no matter the team. I mean, 40 is a lot when they're playing the non-conference. 40 is a big number for any team to score in any scenario. So 40 is a lot. Are they capable? Then yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have the scheme in the second year, continuing to expound upon what Josh Gaddis and the foundation he kind of laid when he first got here. And then when Matt Weiss came in last year, he really took this whole thing to a next level. And I think that's why you see him in that co-OC role with Sharon Moore. And on the topic of Sharon Moore, you talk about the offensive line. And I did on an Iowa radio spot 2 days ago. And that was a question they asked, was about Michigan's O-line and the regression. And it's quite the opposite. It's a progression. Even though they won the Joe Moore Award last year, Dennis, you had Phil Steele on the show, and he said Michigan's offensive line is his number one unit in the country for that position. And I think that's the key. Anyone who knows football well enough knows it's one in the trenches, right? No matter if you're a spread offense, power scheme, whatever it may be, it's one in the trenches. It's one with protection. One that opens up the run scheme, one that protects the passer. All those things are true. And Michigan has the best O-line in the country, according to national pundits, of several of them. And it's hard to disagree with them. Oluwatimi is a world-class center. He replaces Andrew Vastardis, who was a great center, but not an NFL type of guy. Oluwatimi is like a top 3-round guy going into the year. On top of that, Ryan Hayes returns, so you get your pass protector back, your guards return, and you're looking at a guy like Trente Jones. And this is a big point I made on that spot. I'll make the same one here. Trente Jones is a rare case. He's got to replace Andrew Stuber, who's a fantastic tackle, but Trente Jones is a rising junior who had a ton of snaps last year for someone who was not a starting offensive lineman. Michigan, again, you talk about long-term with NIL. Think about the long-term of that. They were getting Trente Jones in there as a bonus blocker, dressing him up like a tight end, and he was getting reps in big moments and big games. It wasn't just him filling in the fourth quarter against Hawaii's third units, right? Like, he had some legitimate experience last year. So the first and foremost thing is the offensive line is fantastic. The wide receiver core all comes back. You add Ronnie Bell, you add Darius Clemens. That just helps you. I know we lost Dalen Baldwin, but Dalen Baldwin, not much of a factor last year. So apart from that, you lost Haskins. Absolutely tough loss. However, Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards are two nationally renowned running backs. So yes, Michigan's offense is more than capable of scoring 40 points. I can't sit here and predict that. That's a high number. Michigan State's weaknesses last year were its secondary. I would imagine that Michigan's wide receiving core and its pass protection combined with its run game setting those things up should equate a lot of offensive production next year or this year as times flied this year against the Spartans at home.
Yeah, I think not only Michigan will score more than 40 points against Michigan State, I think Michigan's going to average their offense over 40 points a game this year in its entirety. Now, yeah, you bring in the soft non-conference schedule. They should score 60, 70 points in those games. But they averaged over 35 points last year. I think with who you just went through what they had up front and some of the other returning players, and then you get to the QBs, I think that this offense takes a step forward. I think that they should average over 40 points. I look to the Big Ten championship game and I look to the Ohio State game. Michigan scored more than 40 points on those two teams. I think that I don't want to start getting too crazy, but I think they can score 50 on Michigan State. So, I think it's going to be that kind of offense. I would say if you're a Michigan fan, you're hoping it's going to be that kind of offense, but I think feeling like it could be an explosive offense isn't just, shaking around the Michigan pom-poms and being like, wow, you're a big homer. They've got the type of personnel, and they showed flashes of that last year. I think over 40 points is definitely something that can happen, and I would predict that right now. OM, who has a follow-up question, he hears that Michigan is leading for Nyckoles Harbor. That is a 5-star defensive end. Now, you're more attached and in tune with the recruiting than I am. I'll give you a crack, although I do have an opinion on this, but I'll give you the first crack on this.
Yeah, so what I'm doing right now is double checking because I got a bunch of names that came through the other day on guys who are going to be at the barbecue. And if you're not familiar, the barbecue is the barbecue at the Big House is the big recruiting weekend at Michigan every year. It's the big one where they host everyone, and every school has their own variation of it. So he's not going to be at the barbecue as far as I know yet. There's a chance he is. It's just he's not on the list that I have right now. And if you're a member, make sure you guys tune into the board. We'll be having that list come out here this week as well. As far as leading for Nyckoles Harbor, I think they've always been a primary, candidate in the race and a top 3 team. Hard to say that anyone leads right now. First off, before we even dive into that, I hate saying such and such leads for recruitments. I mean, we learned that with Dante Moore. I mean, Michigan led for Dante Moore for a year and a half. We learned that with how many others, right? Otis Reese a few years back, if you can remember that one. Just recently with Raylan Wilson, right? So hard to say anyone really leads, quote unquote, but Michigan's certainly in the mix there and a primary candidate for him. And I tell you what, we talk about NIL, we talk about recruiting, and we're at that stage where people are bringing up guys like Nyckoles Harbor, like, oh, Michigan's in the mix for them. And I know that Michigan's always, quote unquote, in the mix, but they can never close the deal. But we're at that stage where as we approach fall, and Michigan has this opportunity to close in on guys like Harbor, guys like Frederick Moore, and beyond that, where now they have this opportunity to kind of flip the script that everyone was kind of moaning and groaning about for the majority of the summer and the spring. And I think we've done a good job in conveying the fact that Michigan's recruiting has always operated this way under Jim Harbaugh. They over-evaluate in the spring and summer and offer the guys they think are going to blow up late, and then they play the long game with the guys who are already blown up and getting pressure to commit at like 4 other different schools. And sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. But in the end, identity fits and evaluations are conducted, and Michigan feels confident when they get those guys rather than feeling like we want to rush this thing just to go get the 5-star because X school and X school told them if they had to commit. And so we had to make a move there, right? So, and those are just like the behind the scenes things of recruiting that we don't see too much. So, yeah, I mean, as far as Harbor goes, to answer your question, yes, primary candidate, fully expect them to be in the race for him. And there is a chance he comes to Michigan, a good chance he comes to Michigan. But at this point, it's just hard to say anyone, quote unquote, leads for him.
Yeah, I was scrolling through Twitter. I don't know if it could have been during the All-Star game last night, or maybe it was the day before. And I think OM, and I don't know where it was from. I don't think it was from us, but it was basically, Harbor's Michigan's to lose or something like that. It was a picture, and it was kind of done up there. And I took notice of it. I was like, oh, yeah, Michigan's in on him. Going back to question 1, where's that one answer? A big question about Michigan. If they're able to land a top 100, in this case, a 5-star defensive end, you'd say name, image, and what? You're like, yeah, NLI, who? That would be huge for Michigan. If they're able to reel in, the July, obviously they've been bringing a lot of, or they've been getting a lot of commitments, but if they're able to pop a 5-star, that's going to go a long way to answering the question about do they know what they're doing with name, image, and likeness. if you are out there and you want to get your question answered, it's Q&A style right now. So go ahead and give us a question, and we will give you the answer. KC just commenting on the Michigan State game, saying it's just a different game. It's clear by now. It is a different game. I know.
Yeah, I think in football, especially, right? Like I don't think there's any other sport that depicts a rivalry on the field more than football. That's where everything kind of goes out the window, right? You could be 3-6, the other team could be 9-0. When it's a rivalry, it doesn't matter. Both teams are going to come out and give their best, sometimes one more than the other, right? And we've seen that so many times on both sides of the coin, Michigan and Michigan State. You think about Michigan, Wisconsin, Stephen 3. I mean, that was a great example. Wisconsin was riding a high, and Michigan was at an all-time low, and they pulled that one off. And then you think about Michigan State when they were having a rough year in 2017, and we thought Michigan was going to have this great year, and then we saw what happened there. And so, of course, I think kind of cool is right on point there. It is a totally different game, and I think that's why I was a little bit more cautionary and jumping at the 40 points thing. Even though, yes, 110% Michigan's fully capable of that, and they should do that against most teams this season. I fully agree with you, but I do think that when it comes to Michigan State and when it comes to Ohio State, and even when it comes to Penn State, not to the degree of the other two, but still when it comes to Penn State and that Big East gauntlet, Big Ten East gauntlet, you really see both teams taking the most out of the other, and any prior games really don't matter. It's a rivalry. And here's the thing, like in baseball, you don't see that very much, right? Like in basketball, yeah, a little bit, but like football, like the aggression, the physicality, the tenacity, everything that involved in it, it's just perfectly, I think, encapsulates what a rivalry is. So
yeah, and game times, people are getting wrapped up in those because they have seen Michigan go to Iowa City at night and have trouble against the Hawkeyes. That's why people keep putting up disclaimers like, yeah, they like Michigan to beat Iowa if it's not at night. But, if it's at night, now that kind of feels like that it would close things up. That's why that Michigan State game, it's right in the mix there where Michigan has a bye and so does Michigan State. But you got Penn State, bye, Michigan State. One of those games is going to be at night. And if that other game's, the Big Fox noon game, it feels like whatever it is for Michigan or Penn State, that the crowd is not going to be as activated and engaged as they would be an amaze out if it was against Michigan State. I mean, that's true. That's something that you have to, I don't know if it's overcome, but it is part of it. Let's get to another question. Brandon Justice, the Maize and Blue Review senior editor, is with us here. Type in your question or call us. We will put you up. We will put your question up on the board, and we will answer it. Here's the question. What do you read into Cade McNamara going to the Big Ten coaches meetings? Brandon, he is headed there with three of his other teammates, headed to Chicago for the Big Ten coaches meetings. What do you read into it?
They're actually in Indy this year. Last year they switched it to Indy, now becoming the hub of the Big Ten a bit more than Chicago, or I guess sharing it in a way because obviously Chicago's. No, you're good. I thought I was going to Chicago until like Friday, and then I realized I was going to Indy. Josh sent me the hotel information, and I said, "Oh wow, we're in Indy. All right, cool." Which is shorter and better for me anyway.
The bars stay on quickly. The bars stay up until 4:00 in the Windy City if you're staying all night. Which for 10 years I went to the Big Ten coaches meetings. Which that extra 2 hours matters. And Indy is a very nice downtown area, but I don't believe, and I've participated in some of the nightlife there as well. But I don't think that they stay up until 4:00 in the morning.
No, but they have a great comedy club, and I know Chicago is kind of like. Probably got way more. I mean, Chicago is overall it's a better city than Indy by every, I would say, scale, most scales at least. Lucas Oil is probably a little bit nicer than Soldier Field. That's about it. Other than that, like Chicago pretty much takes the cake and everything against any Midwest city, I would say, and most cities in general in the country besides LA, New York, and maybe Miami. But aside from that, I'm a big Austin guy. I like Austin, Texas, but. Aside from that, Indy, yeah, I did Indy for baseball several times, and we did a comedy show 2 years ago. It was my first ever comedy show, and it was a blast. So I might do that again.
You were the comedian, or you just went to the comedy show?
Oh no, I just watched and cheered and laughed.
Okay.
Right? I've been told maybe take the stage at like a local downriver establishment for a 5-minute open mic, but I don't know if I'm capable of the downtown Indy 30-minute set quite yet, but maybe 10 years from now. Maybe I'll get on, and I know he's technically not, he's a different network, but Alan True, who's a phenomenal stand-up comedian and also doubles as a college football writer. Maybe I have a little bit of him in my DNA. Who knows? But on the topic of Cade McNamara, yeah, I think this is telling, no doubt. Which not surprisingly, right? Like we've all kind of like written in Cade's name into the depth chart. Now, here's the other side. Again, I keep saying this today, but here's the other side of the coin. We have like a whole fall camp, right? So like, of course, Michigan has to decide who their representations are going to be at the Big Ten meetings. And in that same vein, like that is essentially usually a preview for who the captains are going to be, right? And it doesn't always equal out to the exact. It's not always those guys end up being the captains, but more times than not, the majority of them do. And a lot of times it's been all of them end up being there. And there's no questioning the fact that Cade McNamara, overlapping from last year, is one of this team's vocal leaders, especially offensively. And whether or not he's a starting quarterback, I still think he'll be that voice for the offense. Now, I am a full believer that this is a 2-quarterback system until something extraordinary happens for one of the two, whether it's good or bad. And so for me, Cade McNamara going is he's just got the seniority, right? Like he's done this before. He has a whole season under his belt. He's clearly got the respect in the locker room. Not that JJ does, and he certainly does, but I think seniority and, 14 games as a starter last year is enough for them to decide, okay, we've got to send one quarterback. Here's the thing about the 2 quarterbacks, Dennis. They're both phenomenal leaders. Like both of those guys could be the captains of this team. Both of those guys are seen as leaders of this team, and not just the offense. I mean, the whole program, both guys, JJ and Cade. JJ since he got here, and Cade since he really started to ramp it up last year. And so I'm a full believer this is a 2-quarterback system. So as far as reading into Cade going to Big Ten meetings, I think it's just a sign that he's a leader, and I don't think that's at all shocking to us. So I don't want to read too much into it, but like, yeah, he's a starting quarterback. I don't think that's the only thing we could really take away from it, is that they see him as a starter maybe. But again, I don't think that was ever a question. I think we're all kind of like on board with that. And again, there's still fall camp. JJ could go into fall camp and have the best fall camp ever and end up being out there for the first snap. But again, still, I don't think anything's going to change besides injury, knock on wood, that this is going to be a 2-quarterback system.
Yeah, I'm right with you on that. That's my answer. Michigan is going to run a 2-quarterback system. And if you look at the timing, like the Big Ten coaches meetings in Indianapolis, they are next week. You didn't have McCarthy. He wasn't able to because of his shoulder. He wasn't able to compete for the starting job during the spring. So right now, Cade McNamara is your starter. He started last year, and he was participating in spring ball. So if the coaches meetings were a week before the season, it could be different. But can you win the job in fall camp? Maybe, but probably not. I think it's going to be in those. I wonder if you can win it in the non-conference. I think you can. I really think when we get our chance and everybody else gets their chance to see the QBs, wondering if they're going to let them compete, wondering what kind of offense that they're going to allow these guys to run, playing time, snaps. Those are all the things that are intriguing. Jeremy with a question on Question and Answer Wednesday. Do you believe the quarterback who starts the year is the same quarterback that starts by week 5? Brandon.
Yeah, I think that's right on cue, right? We just talked about non-conference, and that's about where we're at week 5. I'll start with this. I still think 2 QB system. I still don't see I think 2 QB system scaled up from last year. Last year, we just saw 2 guys mixed in, I think. I don't think JJ was a 2. I don't think it was much of a 2 QB thing as people said it was. They used both of them, right? And there were situations where JJ would come in. But, I mean, the snap shares were clearly more Cade. I think this year we see a ramp up in snap share for JJ, and it amplifies the conversation about 2 QB system and makes it more realistic. And on paper, it looks like a 2 QB system. I think with the eye last year, we saw 2 QB, but when you looked at the snap shares, you really saw 1 QB and another guy just mixing in. So by week 5, I mean, that's tough because you're basically thinking at that point, if it's starter changes, it's just the point you just made, Dennis. It's one in the non-conference, right? If there's a different one by week 5. Again, I'm still on this side of it where I think it's going to be a 2 QB system for the entirety of the season. I think Michigan sees what it has in Cade McNamara, who's more than a game manager to them. He's decisive, he's cerebral, and you can say, quote unquote, that he's safe. I don't think he's safe. I think he's smart. And I think that sometimes comes off as safe, right? So what's the difference is Cade only throws the ball under 10 yards, right? That's what they say a lot of people. He showcased he could throw it beyond that last year quite a bit. He's just not forcing the throws down there that aren't going to happen to sacrifice the drive, right? So Michigan sees that in Cade. And JJ, they see what we all see. This incredible ceiling, this high upside, incredible leader. The arm talent is next level. It's NFL all written all over it. Moves so well with his legs, forces defenses to have to take care of him more than the others, something that Cade doesn't do. But again, he's, despite the superstar and all the factors that he has, he's still only 19. He still has plenty to learn about this game. Granted, if J.J. McCarthy was at pretty much any other Big Ten school besides Ohio State, and maybe he doesn't beat out Sean Clifford at Penn State, but I'm going to put my money on him beating out Peyton Thorne. I'm going to put my money on him beating out Graham Mertz. I'm going to put my money on him beating out anybody at Illinois. I'm going to, you know what I'm saying? So in my opinion, both of these guys are starters at most other schools. And from what we see, it's a little bit different. We see a limited guy in Cade and we see an ultra high ceiling in JJ. But what Michigan sees is 2 guys who run the game differently, but provide an offense that is so versatile and from drive to drive forces defenses to have to switch their entire MO. Because you think about it, if Michigan goes, and this is entirely possible, if Michigan goes drive by drive with these guys for the first half of every game, and then they just ride a horse in the second half.
What do you mean alternate quarterbacks on each series? Is that what you're saying there?
Yeah, if they alternate quarterbacks on each series, or maybe it's like every 2 series. But either way, I foresee it being far, far, far more frequent than we saw it last year. Mm-hmm. If they do that, and again, Michigan, this is what people have to embed in their head because I know what the counter is going to be. Okay, Michigan believes it'll work. They don't think there's going to be chemistry mix up. They don't think that their offense is going to be on edge because they're switching quarterbacks so much. They think it's going to be a seamless and extremely dangerous thing to put out in the field for the opposition, right? So they think the opposition is going to be on their toes, having to switch up drive by drive or every couple of drives or sometimes even as we saw last year in the middle of a series, they'll switch, right? So they think that factor plays into their favor. And the popular counter is, well, how are you going to switch up your quarterback? It's going to throw your offense off. There's not going to be any rhythm. There's blank, blank, blank. Michigan doesn't see that as a problem. They think both of these guys, and they think that this offensive line and all of its weapons and running backs are fully capable of doing that seamlessly and comfortably and successfully.
Yeah, and I don't know whose voice you were using there to say, the part about, not being able to get the continuity. I agree with whoever that person is. And I also just look to the history of the position where there's ways that you can put a 2 quarterback system in there, but it's dangerous. And other guys are always looking over their shoulder. I think even in the Michigan State game, whatever it was with Corum and McCarthy, and I know the experts said, well, that was Corum, not where, however he was, being presented the ball. That's more on running back. I still put some of that shared fumble on McCarthy. And if you're working with your first string guy all the time, and then McCarthy comes in and he places the ball just a little bit differently, it's all of those things. And it can be from the offensive line who's used to listening to a certain cadence and hearing the certain quarterback. And I know you have to be prepared for all the different guys coming in, but it's dangerous. And, it may have cost them against Michigan State, that game with the 2 quarterbacks. You can go a lot of different ways. It was ultimately the defense, I think, that cost them, not the quarterbacks. But I'll make my prediction right now, Brandon. I think, you got to figure, at some point you got to say, hey, here's how I think it's going to play out. I think Cade McNamara is going to start against Colorado State. I don't think they're going to go series by series, but I think that if I think whatever the plan is, they could say, we're going to put McCarthy in there for the first series of the second quarter. I don't believe by game 2, but by game 3, by the start of the Big Ten season, which is against Maryland at home, I don't think that McCarthy's going to start that game. But the first game on the road at Iowa, I think that J.J. McCarthy will have done enough in those first 4 games. Hey, the best man can win the job. I just think that by October the 1st, J.J. McCarthy will start against the Iowa Hawkeyes. And, yeah, they'll continue to put McNamara in, and he'll get snapped. But it's going to be McCarthy's job to lose starting on October 1st. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I don't think you're at all wrong for that. And another thing is I don't think that anyone is wrong for saying that it's not going to work. My point is that Michigan thinks it will. So anyone who wants to counter what they're going to do with this system, it doesn't matter to them. They believe it's going to work, and they've been saying that since last year. And, you know, aside from your point about the fumble, for the most part, it did work, right? And I mean, JJ gave them life. I get it. They got absolutely blown out in that national semifinal. They never had a chance, but JJ showed a decent amount of life for them. Like, he was the one that gave them a fighting chance, not to win, but a fighting chance to look like they belonged as a college football playoff team. So, yeah, I don't think you're wrong at all. And as far as JJ starting by October 1st, I don't think you're wrong for that either. I think we can pretty much make any prediction about when that's going to happen and all that. Now, do I think JJ's the better quarterback? Yes, I do. I do. From a true talent perspective, absolutely. I don't think that's like a secret at all. I think that Cade McNamara has an undeniable track record that is extremely difficult for a coaching staff to say, hey, he's not going to be the guy this year. And that's what makes it difficult to predict. And the other side of it is that Michigan truly believes in it.
Yeah, except at the end of the year, which is important, but McNamara displayed that he knows where to go with the football, and he didn't take negative. He didn't get sacked a lot. He didn't turn the ball over a lot. Those are very important things. I'm wowed by McCarthy when he throws the ball and moves around. Like, it looks, it does look like Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers. I mean, it's hard to, not get excited about that kind of stuff. All right, let's, we can sit and talk. We have frequently talked about these different scenarios. I like it. So I don't know, at some point, you get tired of it. I have not gotten tired of it. And here we are getting into the later stages of July. Before long, it'll be out there and it will reveal itself. Let's get to our next question. And we don't always talk about Michigan football and basketball and hockey and baseball and softball. Sometimes I'd say 1% of the time or 2% of the time we go off the maize and blue path. And this time we're going to the Midsummer's Classic, which was last night. And we have Coach Justice with us. I mean, he is baseball through and through. So I'm very interested to hear the answer to this. Brandon, you love baseball. How much of the All-Star game did you watch last night?
I did not watch the All-Star game last night, but I watched the Home Run Derby the night before, which was great. I love the Home Run Derby. I don't think it had a lot of entertainment value this year. I think Julio Rodriguez was the big show on at the Home Run Derby. But as far as the All-Star game goes, I think the MLB presents the most competitive of any All-Star game, where you are getting a bit of a true game. The American League has dominated. They won again, I think 9 years in a row, right? Something like that. Again, the All-Star games for me, for baseball, and you compare that to the Pro Bowl, you compare that to the NBA All-Star game. The NHL has kind of gotten off the All-Star game format. I know they're doing like 3-on-3 playoffs, which is cool and really neat and a good idea. Not Michigan. We're talking so much about Michigan. Baseball doesn't really have that format where they can create something like that, and neither does football. So it's cool to see hockey remix it. Now, as far as the MLB All-Star game goes, I think it's the most true depiction of what an All-Star game is and should be. It's guys trying their hardest, doing their best, and it's all of the best ones competing against each other and in a showcase of, quote unquote immortals, I guess you could say. And I love the All-Star game. I know you got the picture of Miggy up there, and did you see I don't know if you guys saw this, but the pregame, he was in a suit and they told him he looked good, and he's like, I always look good. I love Miggy, man. I mean, I grew up on Miggy. Like, I'll be 50, 60 years old talking about Miggy. Like, he was one of the best hitters of all time, and we were just lucky enough to witness his career. And it's just great to see that he's still having fun on his way out. But yeah, I love the All-Star game. I just didn't have a chance to watch it yesterday. As we all know, I mean, it's no secret, baseball is a slow burn. Hand in the air, baseball is a slow burn. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's the most electrifying sport on the earth. And the All-Star game itself is also too. But I don't know, man. Here's the one problem I have with the All-Star game. It was in LA, and I get LA. The Dodger Stadium is one of the nicer stadiums from a not really from a facility perspective, but from a viewership perspective. It just looks great.
Yeah, the aesthetic is awesome. I'm with you on that.
It's incredible.
You got palm trees in the background. It is cool.
I love Dodger Stadium. Now, just this is nitpicking. The All-Star game is supposed to be under the lights, like from the start to the finish. And so it's hard to watch California for 3 hours in daylight. You know what I'm saying? So that's the only reservation I had. And I get it. They got to hit all their big markets, and I don't have a problem with them doing it in LA, not to mention the Dodgers coming off of, the fantastic run they've been on the past 5 years, and Dodger Stadium itself is gorgeous and amazing. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, for me, from a viewership perspective, like, the All-Star game is meant to be under the lights. Remember the one in Detroit? I mean, first pitch, under the lights. Home run derby, first swing, under the lights. That's how it's supposed to be, in my opinion. But yeah, didn't watch it. Did not watch it.
Yeah, well, the 71 All-Star game in Detroit at Tiger Stadium was one of the most famous All-Star games ever. I'll nitpick it a little bit. There were a few things that I liked. They had the pregame stuff's always great when they announce all the players and all of that. They had the pitcher mic'd up, and he is talking with John Smoltz. Like, he's like, what should I throw here? And Smoltz like, hit him down, sinker inside, back foot, and he throws it. It was pretty awesome, to see that. Then he actually hit him. And then they have, they've had players mic'd up before, so we've seen a little bit of that. But they had Stanton and Judge mic'd up at the same time, and they're talking about, what they do at Yankee Stadium to keep themselves occupied. And they're talking about, scissors, paper, rock, paper, scissors, that, they're doing that in the outfield. And, that stuff was pretty cool. Now, I'm going to defer to you with this. I like when the players just wear, like, I would like, you see Cabrera wearing whatever that is, a gold Detroit. And maybe they end up selling tons of these jerseys and hats, and and Major League Baseball would say, yeah, you're crazy. Nobody's buying any of these other things. They're gobbling these up. I would like them to have any kind of pregame, any kind of the home run derby, wear all of this. But when it comes to the All-Star game, I like wearing the hometown uniforms. Now, you could tell me, maybe you think they're great and you'd want to go out and buy it, and you thought it looked cool with everybody wearing the same uniform, but I like the way it used to be that way, although I get that they want to sell some merchandise there. Couldn't they just have them all change it out before the game started?
Yeah, I think you make a good point. Like, they're trying to sell merchandise. That's the entire idea behind it. But I'm fully with you. I mean, nothing beats hometown threads. Nothing beats seeing all the jerseys on the field at one time, and the different designs and the contrasts of each and the colors and this, that, and the other thing. And it just feels a little bit more real when they're in their hometown threads. It feels like sometimes there is such a thing as too much pageantry, right? And I feel like when we're putting them in those black and gold uniforms, and tell you what, like the MLB All-Star game, they've had some real bad uniforms in the past, and like these weren't so bad and hard to look at. I was appreciative of the neutral colors for the most part. Like, that was fine. But nothing beats the hometown threads, man. You see the English D out there next to a pinstripe, which is next to a Mets in the box, and it's just great to see all of that at once. Like, that's what the All-Star game is, because that's what it was for so long before. So I'm fully with you on that. I wish we did that in every sport, because the Pro Bowl is disgusting too. Like, those uniforms stink. They're just gaudy and gross. Everyone's trying to be Oregon, and they're just not. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm fully with you with the All-Star game. I wish they did hometown threads, because how many times are we going to be able to see Cabrera on the field in an All-Star game? That's probably the last time, unless like Manfred decides to pick him again next year as like the honorary guy. But I would have loved to see him in the gray. I mean, those are my favorite Tigers uniforms, by the way. Rare that I like the away uniforms more than the home in sports, but the Old English D, I know at home it means a lot to people. But for me, ever since I've been a kid, I've always loved the away set more than the home, just because gray and blue and orange, just not something you'd expect to go together well, but they're so gorgeous, and I love them. And that's the jersey I wish I could have of every player that I like on the Tigers. And so I would have loved to see Miggy in it one more time at the All-Star game.
I used to cry and complain all the time about third jerseys and uniforms. And then I thought the time Maryland came out with that state flag that they had, and it was like the biggest monstrosity. And then sure enough, first person that called up, I was doing a talk show. I was like, I think it's great. It was so awesome. Like, this is predictable. Everybody, it could be the worst thing ever. Somebody's going to be thinking, I think it's awesome. I think Michigan State had these these nuclear green highlighter type uniforms. I thought those are terrible. And I love them. I got to get them. You're getting too old. All right. I am getting too old. But it really happened in 2011, like September 10th, 2011, Michigan was playing Notre Dame under the lights, first time ever. And a couple days before, they break out these jerseys, and it looked like, and I know it was a past jersey, but it looked like they threw a blank canvas to a bunch of kindergartners and said, go ahead and make up a uniform, because that's what it looked like. There were some crayons out there, and, they had the bumblebees on the side. And I'm crying about it. But then I went to the game, and I couldn't believe how many Denard Robinson jerseys are out in the crowd. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then it ends up being like one of the all-time classic games. Denard Robinson throwing a touchdown, winning the game with just a couple seconds remaining. And then afterwards, seeing everybody with those jerseys. And I thought, I'm changing my opinion. When the team wins and they wear jerseys, I end up, it vaults it way up high. I end up liking them that much more. And then I said after that, I've learned my lesson. Like, it doesn't matter what the jersey, if they win and people are buying them. And then, a lot of things are geared towards kids in high school. Like, they like that. Like, that it might be a recruiting thing. Like, hey, you just mentioned Oregon. Oregon's got a million different jerseys, and the kids like it. And that's one of the reasons that they end up going there. That and guaranteed jobs for the families. But that's something for something else. But the uniforms definitely play into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the Bumblebee uniforms. What was worse than the ones against Notre Dame was the ones against Michigan State that year.
They lost to Michigan State. They're terrible.
Yeah. And right, they lost it too. And it wasn't pretty either. I think that was Golston and Le'Veon Bell's year, right? Tough. But yeah, I hated those uniforms. Those were, still do. Those were brutal. I don't know, man. There's so many like examples of good uniforms out there, like that are alternates, and then there's also the flip side of so many bad ones. And Michigan State's neon ones are up there for one of the worst ever. I don't know how anyone finds any sort of like inkling of enjoyment with those. They're just like so bad. And I'm a big fan of Michigan State's kits. Like, I love the Spartan head on the helmet, and I love the green on green when they're at home, and I love the white on white when they're on the road. I think they look clean and crisp, and their fonts, like, they got super lucky that Nike went out of their way to give them a specific font that is completely synonymous with their program. I mean, when you see that curved S, like, that's Michigan State, and you see it on so many different sports teams. Like, I see so many baseball teams with that same font style, because when they get Nike uniforms, it's an option for them. And we've seen so many other Nike schools with the same font face on there as well, and Michigan State originated that. So it's just a shame that they went out of their way to make a jersey as bad as the neon ones. And Michigan set, there's arguably no uniform in college football more traditional, more classic than Michigan set. And when they come out with the all maize ones, I'm fine with that. You're not really messing with much with the all maize. I think you're just kind of tweaking some things. The all blue, everyone loves the all blue. The all blues are gorgeous. The maize pants, the all white, those are fine. As long as you don't mess with the helmet, and as long as you don't play around too much with the top, everyone's fine. Mix up the colors as long as you want. Just don't put a bunch of stripes on the shoulder, and we're all good.
All right, I've got 3 more questions. I'm going to Clubhouse. I can't put this question up on the screen, but I do look at the Clubhouse room chat. Dirt McGirt wants to know who are some of Michigan's offensive line targets. I don't know if you guys have addressed that, because he got in a little bit late. Well, Michigan does not have a commitment as of yet. I can tell you that. So I think that is a pretty good question coming in about offensive linemen. And I have looked over the last week. I saw that Josh Henschke put recruiting notes about specifically offensive linemen. I actually did not go in and read that story, but I imagine that he had a couple different targets on there, Brandon. But in Michigan is going to look at, like, every class, you're going to add a couple offensive linemen, and they have not been able to, and they've been in on a few, but they have not been able to reel any in as of yet.
Yeah, Sam Pendleton and can't remember his first name, but Kabunga, the kid who just went to LSU. Those are two guys that they were really like banking on, right? But here's the thing with Michigan's offensive line recruiting in 2023, and this relates to a few of their positions, but we'll just specifically target the offensive line here. They're extremely deep. Like, they can afford to not get an offensive lineman in this class. Like, I know that that's not ideal, and they will certainly get offensive linemen in this class. Like, that's not a question at all. They will definitely get 1, 2, maybe 3. But they can survive without him. I mean, I know Landon Hatchett's the big one. Like, Landon Hatchett's one that Michigan fans are excited about. He's a dual sport athlete, plays baseball, and he's a guy that they want. There's a few schools after him, and I think he's like started as a 3-star and out to a 4-star and starting to rise some more. So I think Landon Hatchett's like the big name. But between Kabunga and Pendleton, I mean, Pendleton ended up at Notre Dame, but Pendleton was, I mean, he was all in on Michigan after his visit, then went to Clemson, got all in on Clemson, came back to Michigan for a visit, not a whole lot, went to Notre Dame next week, committed to Notre Dame, that was that. So again, like, they've struck out a couple of times. The LSU loss was entirely NIL. Like, that's an NIL-centric loss, not really a recruiting. I guess you could say recruiting because they tie into each other. But again, that's another one of those topics where you got to discuss NIL and where they're at as compared to like a school like LSU. But yeah, I think that, again, like, Michigan's in a situation right now with their scholarship chart where they have so many on scholarship for offensive line that are good and that are going to compete and are going to stick around for a few years and that they're still going to have next year and the year after. That they're able to kind of get 1 to 2 flyers this year if it comes to that, which I don't think it will. I do think they're going to land a guy soon enough. And so, but they can afford to because of the numbers that they have on campus right now. And you think about the guys that are going to be returning over the next few years. I mean, Trente Jones should be back not just this year, but the year after. And you have guys behind him who are playing well as well. You think about Crippen at center, who was pushing Oluwatimi for the center spot in spring camp. Now, Oluwatimi is undeniable, and he's going to win that spot. But Greg Crippen's going to step in next year and be a primary factor. And there's just so many other guys in that locker room. You think about Carson Barnhart. Like, he's supposed to be around next year as well, and he's a guy who could start at most other schools. Like, people are kind of forgetting that, and I'm not saying this to the commenter at all because you didn't point this out. You just simply asked about recruiting. But there's certain others who are forgetting that Michigan's offensive line is evaluated as the best in the country. And it's not like they have their starters and 2 bonus. They have like 10 guys deep in there who could go start at a lot of other schools, maybe 7 who could start anywhere in the Big Ten for the most part, outside of maybe Iowa. Maybe Ohio State has some guys that are better. But other than that, I mean, there's really only 3 guys out of the 10 who I couldn't say could go start anywhere in the Big Ten. So I think they have a good problem right now because they have too many offensive linemen, and therefore they don't have to over-recruit it in 2023, a year where they haven't been as successful in doing it in the early stages.
Yeah, Barnhart started some games. He could start at right tackle. Certainly makes a good swing tackle. All right, we got 2 more questions and then 2 more answers. Back to Clubhouse. Paul saying, Notre Dame targeting $75 million annual in media right payouts in quest to remain independent. He says, I'm tired of Notre Dame snubbing the Big Ten. Go ahead, Brandon. They're looking for $75 million. What about getting snubbed maybe once again by the Fighting Irish?
I mean, at this point, Notre Dame has been doing the hokey pokey with the Big Ten for like 30 years, right? Like, we keep
100 years.
Yeah, right. So it's like, I don't know. At this point, I get it. Like, you want Notre Dame in the Big Ten because you don't want them to run scared of the rivalry anymore from a fan perspective. And then if you're from a conference perspective, you want Notre Dame for the notoriety that they bring, for the standards that they bring, the academics that they bring. I mean, Notre Dame's would be, there's no questioning the fact that Notre Dame would be undoubtedly the best addition of all the candidates for them to add out there between Stanford and Oregon and Washington. Like, nobody wants any other school more than Notre Dame for obvious reasons. They've been independent for forever, outside of, a couple of sports there in the ACC, but they've been independent forever. And they're still as prominent as they are, and every year in and year out. And I think that's only going to get better with Marcus Freeman. So yeah, by all means, like, if I'm pressing a button. Do you want Notre Dame in the Big Ten or not? Absolutely. But like, I mean, the Big Ten holding out for Notre Dame, I don't know. Like, what? It depends what you're trying to accomplish. Like, if you're comfortable with 14 with the addition of USC and UCLA, which I think you should be, then great. But if you want to get to that 16 mark and it's contingent upon Notre Dame, that's fine too. But do you want to get to the 16 mark to get to that? Then you can't sit around and wait on Notre Dame. That's my take on it. It's like, how long are we going to sit around and wait for Notre Dame to join conference before somebody decides that we're going to add 2 teams? Because Oregon and Washington shouldn't wait around in the Big Ten. They're going to have, options galore. They can stay where they're at and just dominate that conference. Like, who's going to disagree with that? Regionally, you don't have to do as much travel and you get to dominate your conference and it stays Power 5 as far as we know right now. Like, yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't leave that by any means. Now, money-wise, you might have to, but I just mean from a football perspective. So, yeah, I think, like, by every stretch of the imagination, you want Notre Dame in this conference. But I don't think that it needs to come at the sacrifice of potentially not adding anyone more if they want to add more. If they're cool with 14 and they're like, hey, we're going to go to 16 only if Notre Dame wants us, then great. Play the waiting game and do whatever. You don't need 16. You're just doing it if Notre Dame wants to. So that's how I see it.
I'm with you. I want Notre Dame, but if they don't want to be here, to hell with them. All right, our final question, and we go back to the board, and this one is about Jim Harbaugh. What's your takeaway from Jim Harbaugh's pro-life statement in Plymouth? Now, I think that was last week, and it just came to light over the last couple days. I'll go first on this one. Jim Harbaugh expressing his opinion on abortion during a speech in Plymouth, it's surprising to me. Not his opinion so much, but it's surprising because he's a football coach. And football coaches don't like distractions, and this is going to be a distraction. There's a very good chance that you're going to be in Indianapolis coming up, Brandon, that there's going to be a follow-up, that somebody is a pro-choice person is going to make their way to Indianapolis, and there's going to be a follow-up. And you could say, well, what does it matter if it's a distraction for Jim Harbaugh? Those players, there's a chance that those players, when in the month ahead into the season, that they're going to be asked about this, and that could be a distraction. Also, when you're a football coach, you're always cultivating the image of your school, of your program. You're the CEO. When Jim Harbaugh was doing all that, who's got it better than us, and doing all the things that he does in the recruiting trail, that was to attract recruits and, shine light on Michigan. I'm not sure this is the kind of light that he wants to be shining here. And timing is also very important when it comes down to this. It happens this week, and it just so happens the sports calendar is the slowest of the year. If this happened in October during the season, people would look at it a little bit and they would move on. Right now, people don't have anything to talk about. They're talking about Jim Harbaugh, and there's a lot of different ways that you can go with these comments. But if you're asking me just about Michigan football, and if Jim Harbaugh would have asked me, hey, how do I think this is going to play for Michigan football? I would have said the Michigan football brand, the Michigan football program. Jim, it's more likely that it's going to be hurtful towards the program. I don't really see how it can generate anything positive when it comes to if we're just talking about the Michigan football program. So now that's what he did. And, that's my answer. Surprising. Not his opinion, but that he would give his thoughts knowing that the topic is nuclear and football coaches don't like distractions. And I'm thinking that this is going to be a distraction. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's going to be a distraction. It is a distraction. It already is, right? Like it's on national media, and like you don't want to see Harbaugh's name on the Washington Post when it's referring to that, right? Like you want to see his name on ESPN about successful football ventures, right? But how I see it is, and just hear me out. I don't know if he knew this was going to happen. He went to an event in Plymouth, which clearly was built around the fact that his opinion is his opinion, right? And everybody there shared that opinion from what I could gather. I don't know if he knew that like reporters were there or that people were going to pass that along. And silly of him to not know that, if that's true. I'm sure he did. He's done this long enough to know that media is going to follow him at every public event he's at. However, I don't know if he knew that this was going to take on the life that it's taken over the past 2 days. he should. He's been doing this long enough to where he should, so I'm not making any excuses at all. But we know Jim Harbaugh. He's a bit odd. We can all agree on that. He's not your everyday human being. So I don't think we're totally off in thinking that maybe he had no idea that in doing this alongside his wife, it was going to take on the life that it's taken on and it was going to blow up the way that it blew up. But again, if that's truly what happened, then like shame on him. He should have known that. Or if he did it knowing that was going to happen and this is just how he feels, then like it's a bit contradicting to tell someone that they can't have an opinion on something and voice it just because of their title or their job or what they do from a full-time perspective. But I fully agree with you. You know, what's more important, that opinion or the effect it's going to have on the program? And that's kind of how I see it. And that's pretty much my only thoughts on it.
Fair enough. I have in my hand here a 1958 Mickey Mantle card, one of the first cards that I ever bought. Now, you say, wow. The thing about this one is in a very rough shape. And I remember I bought it for $1. It was one of the first cards. And my friend also bought one, and he spent like $10 on his. This card now is worth a couple $100 if it's in good shape. Mine, for only $1, has got a crease down the right, and somebody erased Mantle's pinstripes, and they took like a red highlighter to his head. So I don't know if anybody would even give me $1 for my Mantle card. Meanwhile, my friend's card that he spent $10 for, I don't know if he ever got it PSA'd or anything, but I mean, it's a pretty nice card. And, you know, it goes to show you, like if he went out there, I bet he could get $200-$300 for it. I would be surprised if I would be able to get $2-$3, maybe $2 or $3 for my Mantle card. But I
got some for Memorial Day or Memorabilia Day. I got to grab it though. I got to grab it.
Oh, you got to go grab it. While he's doing that, I can tell you that Justice just got a new camera, and it looks really, really good. One other thing I can tell you is that in addition to the questions being answered right now, Josh Henschke, our publisher, just a little while ago, recently put this tweet up that you can get access to our premium content for free until the season opener. Use the code UMFree22 at checkout. UFM22. I'm sorry, UFMFree22 at checkout. You can find out what is Michigan's next move. Go to michigan.rivals.com. You can join up and you can be on the Maize and Blue review. And for me, somebody that worked in sports talk for over 25 years and enjoyed the banter with fans, the sports fans, being able to talk about the games and topics. This is what it's like being on a message board and being in a community, being able to talk all the time with Michigan fans left and right about everything that's under the sun. It's pretty cool. I like it. I'm on there all the time posting whatever anybody has to say, almost always when it comes down to that. So get access to the premium content, Maize and Blue review for free until the season opener. Use the code UFMFree22 at checkout. So if you do that, make sure you say hi to us when you go there and say, yeah, I was watching the YouTube. Then I think Josh is going to say, good job on YouTube, especially if he sees people showing up on the message board. Brandon Justice is there a lot. He's showing up in a little screen there with his brand new snazzy video that makes it the resolution is like 10 times. Like I look at my screen, I don't know if I want people to see anything. I kind of like the blurred vision that maybe that I'm bringing to the table here. But your camera, it looks like I'm watching TV.
Well, that's great news because honestly, I was going to go buy a new camera today because I didn't think this one looked very good.
I think it looks good.
On the preview, it didn't look good, so it just looks a lot better right now, which is good. It has autofocus, so that must be working. I could not find, well, I know where it is, but it's the other room, and I didn't want to cause a commotion. The card I was looking for, so we'll say that for another day. Okay. But I have my smaller stuff over in the corner here in my room, and so here's a good one for you. I think you might like it. Whoop.
So we got a football player there.
It's Brock Lesnar. It's Brock Lesnar's only football card. I don't know if you guys know this, but Brock Lesnar played for the Vikings, and it's numbered out of 249. I can't really see that here, but it is a short print, and it's the color match and everything, So I love this card a lot. I'm a big WWE guy. I always have been since I was young. I've always liked wrestling, and I grew up on Brock Lesnar, and I joined I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this. You have, I know, but some people may not. NFL Prism. Prism's like the number one print. Everyone loves Prism. So this is Brock Lesnar's last Prism card of the 3 sports. Now, he is the only athlete in the history of cards, in the history of Prism, to have 3 different cards in 3 different sports. He has UFC, and there's a Prism for that. So he's in their print to Prism. WWE just released their first ever Prism earlier this winter, and he was in that. And then he made the NFL's Prism this year with his old Vikings stuff as one of the legends. He actually signed in this too, so there's an autograph out there somewhere too. So that's one of the ones it's not worth much. I mean, I could probably get like $15-20 for it, I think, but just hold on to it. It's Brock Lesnar. It's a pretty historic card. It made him the first ever to have a 3-sport Prism. So appreciate that card quite a bit.
I did not know. I mean, I have heard of Brock Lesnar. I knew that he was of WWE fame. I did not know that he played football. How about that?
Yes, very. I mean, we're talking like one training camp, and then he went to the WWE. But he was a wrestler at Minnesota, so he wrestled at Minnesota, and he was a national champion, and then ended up going to the WWE. Very similar to God, what's the guy's name? Gable Stevenson, I think his name is. He was a national champion wrestler this past year. I believe he was at Minnesota too. I might be wrong on that, but he's now in the WWE as well, taking the exact same path that our boy Brock did, except skipping out on the whole football venture before then. So
that's some knowledge. The only Gable that I was from, I think Dan Gable, was he the famed Iowa coach for a couple decades?
Yes.
Great.
Oh yeah, the wrestler. Yep. I think that's why he's named Gable Steven. I think that's why that's his first name. Middle school gym teacher used to make us watch what you just mentioned, Dan Gable's wrestling video. He's a wrestling coach. If you couldn't tell, made us all watch it. It was pretty terrible.
Look at that. When I was little, we'd watch the Crime Dog, Fred McGriff, his hitting video.
Oh yeah.
They couldn't he couldn't have the Brave stuff, so he would just have this plain hat on it. But hey, here's the Crime Dog. And it's just, even though he was a pro and he was a great hitter and everything, you'd be like, this looks a little cheap because
yeah, right.
He's wearing a red and blue hat. Who cares with a Crime Dog? All right. Justice, great stuff. I was going to say, I sent you that text in. I'll talk to you in Chicago. You're probably like, what is he talking about, Chicago? I'm at Indy.
All good. I'm looking forward to it. Big Ten Media Days are always the not actual kickoff, but feels like the kickoff for the season, because it kind of is what I call the gateway to the season. It kind of gets us through the arch, and then fall camp is on the other side.
Woo!
And from there we just hit gas until September 3rd. So it's going to be a blast. Looking forward to it.
I haven't, I've just been taking it one day at a time. But when you just talking about the calendar there, it gives me a second to think about, wow, man, this is really happening. It's happening. Football right around the corner. All right. Thanks for spending so much time with us. We'll talk with you soon. Safe travels.
Appreciate it.